Woo! New walking trail. That was fun. Back so soon. Coronavirus, you gotta stop sneaking up on me like that. Call me Rona. Whatever. That's what I do. So you're here. We must be in the second wave now. Second wave? You're hilarious. Wait, this isn't the second wave? A wave is a thing that goes up and down. But I thought, show me the part where you think it's going down. Is that accurate? Hard to tell these days. I mean, lack of testing, whatever. But no, a second wave is usually when there's been a... It's when what? Hello? Second wave is when... This second is what? Like you trailed off. Who were you texting? Oh, it was just the flu. He's been feeling a little left out, but you know, he's planning a record season. We're trying to sync our calendars. Why didn't you tell your friend the flu? He's not welcome here, and you aren't either. Okay, guess I'll see you later. Yeah, I better not see you at the restaurant I'm eating at tonight. Oh, great, you're eating at a restaurant? Yes. Like get outside and relax. Exactly. Have someone bring you some bread. Finally. That you'll eat with your fingers. Oh. And if you have leftovers, they'll put that food in a box for you. Oh God, no. And it's one of those boxes you have to fold shut. No. And he just struggles with the lid. He just struggles with that little, not the box, that little thing. And he's just like, it's so hard. I gotta touch it all. Burn the box. Just burn the box. You literally make no sense. Some people who get you have no symptoms. I know. Some people are hospitalized. Right. And now there's this syndrome that's affecting kids, but they think it might be you, but we're not sure. I feel like it's my best work, just to keep people guessing. But it's driving me crazy. It's driving us all crazy. Stop it with the phone. No, this is important. My buddy, the massive Saharan dust cloud, is headed this way. And my friends, the earthquake, they said to ask you, what's shaking? That's not funny. Oh, and my new friends just texted. Who? The meth gators. Stop it. Yeah, people are flushing their meth down the toilet. You know what? I can't with you today. And then the gators are drinking the meth and then getting all methed out. You should totally go to the bar later. I won't be there at all. Bye, Corona. You should totally just stand really close to people and just put a little hole in your mask and drink it. It'll be totally safe. I don't believe you. It's totally fine. I'm not gonna be there. It's fine. Cause you're young. It doesn't really affect young people. It's fine. It's fine, you're fine. You're fine. Everything will be fine.
Scene, you're such a good Rona.
Oh, thanks. I can be a pain in the butt with the best of them. So restaurants.
Yes.
That was a true story,
yes.
Like the box folding thing. We have some friends that run really fantastic, awesome restaurants.
Most people are doing a great job.
That are doing a great job.
Yeah,
we actually couldn't get into one of our friends' restaurants, which is funny. We're gonna reenact. We went to a restaurant. I was in panic attack mode the whole time. I did not feel safe. I should have stayed up and gone. So we
having a lot of setup. Hang on.
So anyway, we actually got the food to take it to go because I was not feeling comfortable. So here's how it went.
He comes with this thing. He puts my steak in it, and this is him trying to shut it. I'm not making this up.
Up in his face, and he couldn't, and for 30 seconds, he tried to close the box. He didn't lick it. But it was
soften up the paper.
And it was so, and he was standing right next to us, and I was like, this is how it happens, right? This is how we go down. Yeah.
Finally, Kim was like, can you just leave that steak?
I'm like, just leave it on the table. Yeah. Anyway.
I think he was trying his best, but.
He was.
But the point is, getting back out there and eating, it's great, and we're still scared.
We're super psyched to be in our house for the next year. Thanks, guys. You guys. I mean, there is Sunny. Oh, Sunny funny. That you'll eat with your fingers.
Hello everyone, welcome to United Wesleyan Church Online. We are so glad that you've joined in with us today. If you are new to United, be sure to click on the I'm New link down in the description box below this video, and that's where you can introduce yourself or say hello, or you can share how we can be praying for you. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd like to send you a gift for tuning in with us today, and clicking that little link allows us to do that. Well, if you're watching us today on YouTube, be sure to press the red subscribe button on this video and then click on the little church bell to turn notifications on so that you can stay connected to all of our content here on YouTube. If you're watching us on Facebook, be sure to like our Facebook page as well to stay connected to all that we're doing on our Facebook page. Well, my name is Patrick. I'm one of the pastors here at United Wesleyan Church. And do you know what one of the downsides is to connecting here online? Well, We cannot tell who's tuning in unless you say something in that chat box. So please let us know you're here by typing in that chat box. Maybe today, let's type one thing that you're thankful for today, and we can share all of those together. Well, as you can tell all around me, we're back on the church campus. Just like everyone else, United is in the process of returning to on-site worship in the near future. In fact, if you have not seen our plan for regathering as a church for in-person worship and reopening our facility, then you can click below down in the description box to see that plan. And we're going to continue worshiping online during this month of June, as we have a lot of work to do to prepare our facility and property to fully reopen and to get it ready to host you and our community in a safe and effective way. Once again, we're so glad that you've tuned in today, and no matter where you are or what you may be going through, we want you to know that God is with you and He loves you, and we love you too. And so as we begin this time of worship together, we just invite you to lean in, open your heart to what God would say to you today. Let's worship together. Well, hello again, everybody. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope today's online worship has been an encouragement to you. And if you haven't been with us recently, we kicked off a new series a couple of weeks ago called Reset. And in this series, we're kind of taking a time out from all of the coronavirus chaos and confusion of the past 3 months so that we can ask ourselves some important questions. Because COVID-19 has been this massive disruption in our lives, scrambling our schedules and our expectations of the future. But could it be that this disruption is also an opportunity in disguise, an opportunity to evaluate and reset our lives on the things that matter the most? Because here's where we kind of think we are right now, and that is we're beginning to come out of this COVID-19 shutdown of our lives, right? But we're not quite back to normal yet, and so we're kind of in this in-between season right now, right? And when the coronavirus really kicked in here, it was like our lives pressed this giant pause button on our lives. We were sheltering at home, unable to go to work. Our kids were out of school. Most restaurants were closed. Entire sports leagues shut down. Church services went online. All of that. All of our progress, all of our direction, all seemed to pause. Well, after 3 months of this, it seems like our lives are beginning to unpause a little bit. But instead of pressing that play button, it's like we're pressing the slow-mo button, right? And with our governor's announcement this past Wednesday, it seems like we're going to stay in this slow-mo season just a little bit longer. So the question we're asking ourselves in this series is this: what does God want to do in me or in my family during this season of in-between? Or in this season of slow-mo that we're in right now? Because I believe that we have this incredible opportunity right now during this time, not to hit the pause button, right, or the play button yet, but to hit a reset button on the things in our lives that matter the most. And just like when we need to reboot our computer to fix a problem, sometimes I think our lives need a reboot. Tuesdays are typically whenever I write our messages, start the preparation process for the message, and literally I had to reboot 3 different things this past Tuesday morning, all in one morning. I had to reboot three things. It was my computer, our internet router, and a smart TV. They were all stuck until I pressed the reset button. And sometimes our lives may be stuck too, and we need to hit a reset button. We need to power down, to stop what we're doing, and then restart. It may be in your marriage, maybe your family or your job or your workplace or in your health or your personal finances, whatever area of your life that is stuck for you. This is an opportunity during this in-between season right now to press the reset button and start over. Or if you're like me, you probably feel like it's a good idea to just think through all of these different areas to see what course corrections we may need to take or want to take. So right now, let me just ask you right now, where do you feel that you need a new beginning? A reimagining of how you want to live differently and charting a different course for your life or an area of your life. How do you need to experience a life reset? 2 weeks ago, we talked about making a reset spiritually in our spiritual lives, and then last week we discussed what resets we need to make for our families. So today we're going to try to tackle a topic that has often been taboo or had a stigma attached to it, and that's too bad because I really think that a lot of people could be living better and just healthier lives if they embrace this topic. In fact, I believe that ignoring this topic is one of the worst things that you can do spiritually. And for pastors, ignoring this topic has been a key player in so many ministry meltdowns, moral failures, burnout, all of that kind of stuff. But even after I say all of that, when I tell you what this topic is, you will likely just roll your eyes and you're going to groan loudly enough that I will hear you through your TV or your laptop or screen, whatever your screen is that you're watching this on. Because this is a topic where, even some of our senior saints may even pull out the old saying, maybe that you've heard growing up in church, that, the preacher, he's quit preaching now and he's gone to meddling, right? If you grew up in church in the South, then you've heard that before. I mean, it's right up there with, oh, bless your heart. And we all know that is no blessing, right? Well, look, I'll be upfront with you about this topic. It's not the most exciting thing to speak about, really. It's incredibly practical and helpful and useful, and it will change your life for the better, but it's probably not going to give you any goosebumps along the way, It's less inspirational and more doctor appointment. And I keep putting off telling you what this topic is on purpose because I know that I'm going to lose probably half of you once I tell you. And come to think of it, this probably has to be my worst sermon introduction I've ever created for a topic. But hopefully, I've lowered your expectations now to the point where it's all uphill from here. Like it can only get better, right? Because the area in your life and the area in my life that may need a reset right now is our personal health. Our personal health. And many of you may be thinking, what does my personal health have to do with my spiritual life or with Jesus? And my answer to that is everything. It has everything to do with it. Because there's a sneaky little belief still hanging around in our churches, and this belief was condemned as a heresy way back in the 2nd century AD. And this heresy, this false teaching, was already beginning to form and take shape towards the end of the Apostle Paul's life. And he addresses it in some of his letters to the church. But this false teaching, this heresy, was a belief that the spiritual part of you was inherently good, and then the physical part of you was inherently bad. But that's just not true, biblically or logically. My spirit is not necessarily good, and my body is not necessarily bad. But related to this belief too is that our bodies are not really good for anything, right? Only our spirits matter. And maybe we don't say these things kind of out loud or that specifically, but there's kind of this underlying sense of that, right? We often quote the scripture at funerals that to be absent from the body is to be present with God, right? Meaning our bodies are dead and going to be buried and returned to dust, but our spirits are alive and with God. And all of that is true, but it's not the whole picture. It's not the whole story. Because the Bible speaks about our souls and our bodies being different in function, right? But still belonging together. This is why resurrection is so important. This is why Jesus' resurrection is so important. Because think about it. If only the Spirit matters, then why did Jesus have to be resurrected in his body? Right? Why does the Bible teach that there's going to be this great resurrection of all the dead in Christ who will rise and they will be resurrected bodily to meet Jesus when he comes back? Why would it teach that? But if only our spirit matters, then there's no need for a resurrection. So apparently the body is important. It's important enough for God to want to resurrect our bodies and then perfect them and glorify them, and then he's going to give us new bodies for his new heaven and his new earth when all of this is done. And so your spirit and your body matters to God. They both matter to God. But you and I are also more than just a spirit and a body. We're more complicated than that. We're more complex than just that. In the Bible, there's a story when Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment in all of the Old Testament law was. And he said this. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Heart, soul, and mind. And what Jesus was meaning here was our whole being, right? All that we are. And he's also pointing to what we're made up of, what we're made of as people. And not only do we have this body and a spirit, but we also have a heart and a soul and a mind. And all of these things make up our whole being. But wait just a second, let's not rush past this, okay? Because Jesus could have just said, love God with your whole being, or with all that you are. But he didn't say that. He points out that we're made up of these different parts that are all kind of integrated and mixed together as one. You know, my favorite way that this is taught today, that's super easy to remember, is head, heart, and hands. Head, heart, and hands. Our head is that mental part of us, right? And then there's this emotional, soul-level part, that's our hearts. And then our hands represent our physical actions, our bodies, our strength. And so I say all of that to say this. This is why all of this matters. That so often as Christians, followers of Jesus, we put all the emphasis on the spiritual. Oftentimes we put all the importance on the spirit, but we neglect the body. We put all the emphasis on the spirit, but we neglect the fact that we have a mental part to us, right? There's an emotional part to us, or we neglect the importance of our bodies and our actions as if they don't matter, right? I mean, isn't this true? I mean, so we end up emphasizing believing the right things, right? But neglecting actually doing them and living that out. We emphasize prayer and Bible study, but neglect our mental health and our emotional health and our physical health. That's how this plays out. And up against all of our tendencies to do this as Christians is Jesus saying, love God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind and with all of your strength. We have emphasized the spiritual to the point that we've forgotten that our minds and our hearts and our emotions, our actions, all of these are interwoven and interconnected with the spiritual. Our mental health impacts us spiritually. Our physical health impacts us spiritually. And when we put our faith into action with our bodies, it impacts us spiritually. So now let's put all of this into the context of the last 3 months and this COVID-19 crisis. So the past 3 months have just been downright difficult for most of us, right? Layoffs, furloughs, risk of infection, social distancing and quarantine, no sports to watch, no restaurants or entertainment venues to go enjoy. I mean, it's just been one big pressure cooker of fear and worry and anxiety, all byproducts of this perceived threat of coronavirus. So it's no surprise then that the Washington Post recently reported that over 100 million Americans are at a heightened risk for experiencing mental health distress because of COVID-19. The American Medical Association is reporting increases in substance abuse and substance abuse disorders and overdoses related to COVID-19. There's been a significant increase in spousal abuse and child abuse over the past 3 months as these abusive families are forced to be quarantined together with nowhere to go. And when unhealthy people feel stress, it usually spills out onto other people, like their spouses and their children and their friends. And so if you add all of this up, and I'm leaving a lot out, right? But if you add these things up, there's this massive need for taking care of our personal health. In other words, there's a greater need to care for your mental health, your emotional health, and of course your physical health too. And it's so much, think about this, it's so much more difficult to love God with all your heart when you're stressed out, right? It's so much harder to love God with all your soul when you're struggling with depression, or with all your mind when anxiety keeps you from focusing, or with all your strength whenever you're physically unhealthy. Your personal health matters to God, and it matters to your spiritual walk too. So what are we supposed to do about this? I mean, how do we live in a way that helps us to stay healthy as a whole person. Well, probably the best plan that I've ever seen for this, for staying healthy as a person, has to do with something that I call gauges. And this is a teaching that I received from my former pastor, Tom Harding in South Carolina. And this was a core teaching for us on our ministry staff there. And we revisited this teaching on a regular basis because of how crucial it was for all of us as staff to remain healthy as people. I've actually shared this with you once before, so it may sound somewhat familiar, but I felt like this was something helpful to revisit given our current situation, because I think this is something that can help a lot of us, all of us right now. But you're familiar with gas tanks, right, and gas gauges in our cars. When you fill up your gas tank in your car, your gas gauge goes up, right? You fill up the gas gauge too. And so when your tank is full, your gauge is going to show full. And so you and I are kind of like cars in that sense, that we have a few gas tanks in our lives that we need to fill up in order to be a healthy person. We measure how empty or full those gas tanks are by gauges, and like the gauges on your car's dashboard. And each gas tank, each gauge must be refilled intentionally, or it will run empty. We have to be intentional about refilling those tanks, those gauges, or we'll run out. And so we're going to walk through these 4 gauges just really quickly as a way to introduce you to this topic, and hopefully you can kind of take this and run with it and wrestle with it to think about ways that you can become more personally healthy as we come out of this COVID-19 season that we're in. Well, the first gauge that we want to talk about is the physical gauge. That's our physical health. This is loving God with all your strength, right? We fill this gauge with all the boring things, right? Like exercise and eating healthy foods and getting enough sleep, getting enough rest, taking a Sabbath. And when we're not exercising, when we're eating terrible foods and not getting enough sleep and rest, that physical gauge starts to go down, right? And it will continue to go down until we choose to fill it back up with things like exercise and eating healthy and getting enough rest. I think you get it. The important thing is that we do this intentionally, that we intentionally refill this gauge in good ways so that that gauge does not bottom out. Because when it bottoms out, it's bad for you. It's harmful to your body. And we've all seen the gazillions of statistics, right, of that show how important it is to our physical health to eat healthy foods, to drink plenty of water, to get plenty of rest and sleep, and to exercise. And when we neglect these things, you know, we all know, like, it results in high blood pressure and heart disease and diabetes and heart attacks and strokes. And that's whenever that physical gauge is bottoming out. Now, I feel like I need to issue a disclaimer here that obviously there are times in our physical health that bad things happen, our bodies break, and it's not really by any fault of our own. But most of the time, many of the physical issues that we encounter are because of not taking care of ourselves. And so whatever we can care for, right? So I want you to imagine 2 gas stations. If you have your car and you've got 2 gas stations to choose from, one has a great reputation for having good quality gas, and the other one has a terrible reputation for selling dirty gas with all kinds of dirt and particles and contaminants in it that mess up your engine. Now, which gas station do you want to use? Whose gas do you want to put in your car? Well, of course, we want the good gas, right? And yet we often fill our bodies with dirty fuel, right? That we know will cause us to break down eventually. And again, everything that I'm going to say today is always going to have a disclaimer, right? Because it's not like we can't ever eat something good, or, you know, there are always those moments where you know, we may have to pull an all-nighter, like a youth event or something like that. But it's the habitual, everyday, week in, week out habits and lifestyle that we keep that make a difference for our physical gauge. Our second gauge that we all have is a spiritual gauge. This is for our spiritual health. This is loving God with all of our soul. And so, of course, we fill this gauge with things like prayer, like reading the Bible, studying the Bible, plugging into a church home so that you can serve and worship with other believers like you. We join a small group so that we can do life together and build relationships with other people who are trying to follow Jesus like we are. And we support one another. And so we fill this gauge by talking to Jesus through prayer, spending time with him, and trying to listen to his voice in our lives. And when we neglect these things, our spiritual gauge begins to go down until we choose to begin filling it back up with these things again, right? And again, the important thing is to not let this gauge bottom out. When you notice that it's kind of sagging, when it's getting kind of low, you've got to act so it doesn't bottom out, because that's incredibly harmful to your heart and to your soul. This is that moment when your faith shrinks, or when your faith kind of goes away for a period, right? Or the burnout kicks in, or your relationship with God seems to just start to drift and you feel further and further away from him. That's what happens when we're not refilling the spiritual gauge intentionally and on purpose on a regular basis. So we have another gauge. This is our mental gauge, and this is our mental health. This is loving God with all your mind. And this gauge is so often overlooked. It's more like an oil gauge, because as far as I can tell, that a lot of cars don't even have an oil gauge anymore. All I have in my car is just a warning light that goes off when you're already out of oil. And I'm like, well, that's not very helpful, right? But we fill this mental gauge by engaging and challenging our minds in meaningful ways. We do this by reading books, learning new things. Maybe we learn a new hobby, good conversation with people, all of that, as opposed to just kind of vegging out in front of the TV, or just constantly scrolling our smartphones on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things, right? In measured doses. But if you find yourself vegging out for hours on these things, then your mental gauge is going to start tanking. I can tell when I start my day with a lot of scrolling on my phone. It just makes my mind passive. But when I start my day without it and with other things, I'm way more awake, I'm way more active, I'm way more proactive. There's just something that it does to your brain. It turns it off. I was sharing with someone this week that there was a time in my life that I watched so much cable news. I won't even tell you if it was CNN or Fox News, because either way, you'll judge me, right? So I won't do that. But I watched so much of it, and I would just turn it on, and I would leave it on all day. It would just run in the background constantly. It was kind of addictive, right? But I began to realize over time that so much of what I was filling my mind with was so unhealthy, and it was anxiety producing, that I had to cut it back. It began to dawn on me that, you know what, there's always breaking news, apparently, right? There was never not a time when there wasn't breaking news. And I began to realize that I was just overstimulated emotionally, but understimulated mentally. It's like it made me dumber, but more anxious, all at the same time. And I've had several friends recently tell me that they've temporarily just taken Facebook off their smartphones or off their computers because it's just causing too much anxiety and even anger in them right now. And you know what? That was a healthy decision for them. That was a great decision for their mental health, to keep that mental gauge from tanking. The Apostle Paul says it this way in Romans 12. He says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good and pleasing and perfect will." He points to the importance of our minds and our mental health. Our minds desperately need refilling on a daily basis. And we always have the choice to refill them with good things that impact our thinking in good ways, or we can just fill them with junk and negativity and harmful thoughts. And this is where the wisdom from the Apostle Paul again comes back to us in Philippians 4. It's so relevant here, where he tells us, he says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. These are the things that will fill our mental gauge in our lives. It'll fill it with life instead of death. And the last gauge that we all have is our emotional gauge. This is our emotional health. This is loving God with all your heart. And this gauge is tricky because it's not like the other gauges. And this is kind of this is the twist in the story. This is the twist in the teaching that you don't expect, okay? Because the challenge with the emotional gauge is you cannot feel this gauge directly. You can't control it directly. It's more reactive. You can only feel this gauge by filling the other gauges. Let me say that again. You can only feel your emotional gauge by filling your other gauges. They feed into this. And so if you're not minding your physical gauge, you're not minding your spiritual gauge, you're not tending to your mental gauge, then more than likely your emotional gauge is tanking too, which is dangerous and destructive. Listen, when our emotional gauges bottom out, bad things happen. We make very bad decisions, stupid decisions. When our emotional gauges bottom out, that is when the affairs happen. That's when the horrible financial choices are made. It's when we try to self-medicate ourselves with alcohol or drugs, or we may try to escape into pornography, or it's when you give up on the church or you leave the ministry. Bad things happen by good people whose emotional gauges are bottomed out. You know, Katie and I received the news of a former youth student a couple of years ago now, that passed away of an overdose of drugs. And man, this kid was a great kid. He was so smart. He had a great sense of humor, a great heart. But somewhere along the way, he picked up this habit of self-medicating his emotional struggles with drugs, which turned into this addiction that ultimately took his life. And his story is just repeated over and over all around us. Over the past 3 years or so, just with Katie and me, we've had at least 5 friends or family members wreck their lives because their emotional gauge was tapped out and they made a terrible decision. Their interior life, what was going on inside of them, was unhealthy. And it led them to make some terrible choices. And these were all really good people. They still are good people, making terrible choices because they did not know how to refill their tank with good things. Respected author and pastor Peter Scazzaro goes even further in connecting the importance of our emotional health and our spiritual health. He says this in his book. He says, it's impossible to be spiritually healthy while remaining emotionally unhealthy. He writes an entire book that supports that statement. Emotionally healthy spirituality. You should Google it, buy it, read it. It's fantastic. But could it be that your spirituality and my spirituality, our spiritual lives, are held back by our emotional unhealthiness? Is that possible? And I think it is. Jesus talks in multiple places about the importance of what is going on inside of us. We know this, but we may not realize, what we may not realize is the impact of our physical gauge, what we eat and sleep, our exercise, the impact of our mental gauge, what we're filling our minds with, our spiritual gauge, prayer, scripture, all that has on our inner life. So here's the takeaway from all of this. Here's the takeaway from these gauges. Is that when our lives are crazy busy and we're anxious and we're barely getting by, how well do you think we are minding our gauges? How well do you think we're paying attention to our gauges? probably not too well, right? I mean, if we don't have the time to focus or energy to intentionally fill these gauges, then our physical and spiritual and mental and emotional health are likely on the decline. Even more so when you're living in the middle of a pandemic. And the danger and the consequence to not hitting this reset button on our personal health is that these gauges become depleted, and when they're depleted, bad things happen. If your gauges are bottoming out, man, you're more than tired. You're more than exhausted. You are depleted. And when you get to that point, a good night's rest is not going to solve it. It's not enough. It's going to take a lifestyle change of intentionally investing in those gauges to get back to a healthy place, and it will take time. And we don't want to get to that point. And so here's the thing. Yes, you and I will benefit from filling and refilling these gauges in intentional ways. But ultimately, ultimately the real payoff here in all of this is that others around you too benefit when you do this. Your family, your neighbors, your friends, the people around you that God has placed in your life to reach for Him, they benefit when you are healthy. So I challenge you to hit the reset button on your personal health. Begin refilling these gauges on a regular, intentional basis. You know, honestly, I think they're all daily gauges. I think there's some daily habits that we can all do that help to keep them filled up, to keep them from hitting empty. And so what we can do is begin saying no to things that we know are not important, right, that are just time consuming. And we can begin cutting things out of our schedules that are keeping us from refilling our gauges in healthy ways. And you know what? You and I, we're going to be healthier. We're going to feel better when we do this. And because you are healthier, the people around you will be healthier. They'll benefit. Your family, your church, the people in your life who need Jesus will benefit because you are healthy. So what do you need to do to begin refilling that physical gauge? Is it a trip to the doctor or to the gym? Is it revisiting your diet, what you're eating? Is it taking your meds? What is it that you need to do to keep that physical gauge as high as possible? And I understand some of you that are older, it's like, I can't do all of that stuff anymore. No, but you can do something to invest and pour into this physical gauge. What do you need to do to begin refilling your spiritual gauge? Prayer, reading the Bible, worship, meeting with other people who are trying to follow Jesus too, letting them support you, praying for one another, studying God's Word together. What do you need to do to begin refilling your mental gauge? Do you need to uninstall social media on your phone or change some of your TV habits? Or what is it that pick up a new book or pick up a new hobby? When you mind these gauges, you will be filling up your emotional gauge, and you will feel those emotions evening out. And we all win. We all win when our hearts and our lives are healthy. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So yeah, what does personal health have to do with Jesus and with your spirituality? Everything. Let's pray together. Jesus, we thank you that you have created us with all kinds of creativity and complexity, Lord, and just variety. We look around and we're just amazed at the diversity that we see in your creation and in each other. And so, Lord, we celebrate that, and we're thankful for that. So, Lord, I just pray that in this moment, this is not a exciting topic, but it's a needed topic. And so, Lord, I'm even thinking of myself now, just things that I need to change, some reset buttons that I need to push in my life as it comes to personal health. And so, Lord, give us the courage and the faith, Lord, to make the decisions that we need to make, to hit the reset buttons that we need to make, Lord, to change the habits that we need to change. And Lord, may we encourage each other along the way as we do this. Lord, that your church may be a healthy church and not an unhealthy church. We can be a church that you can move through even more so because we're healthy people. And Lord, for those that are hearing this message today and they're struggling physically, they're struggling mentally, they're struggling emotionally, and it may be because of no fault of their own. It may be that they need medication. It may mean that they need medical help. Lord, I pray that they would sense no judgment or no critique of them, but Lord, only love and only encouragement to continue pursuing those things that they need to find health in their life. And Lord, for those of us that have healthy bodies, Lord, help us not to take them for granted, that have healthy minds and healthy hearts. Lord, may we truly take this verse to heart, that we would guard our hearts, for out of our inner being flows everything else. God, we love you. We thank you for your love and your faithfulness to us. We pray this in your name.